We've talked a lot on the YouTube channel about Dead Space 4, and I want to continue talking about that, guys, because I think that us talking about it is getting people excited. It's getting the rumblings, it's getting the talk, the speculation going that this game could very well come out at some point or another. And you guys can check out all the Dead Space 4 content here on the YouTube channel, but I want to go ahead and talk about an article that came out. It came out a while ago, guys, but I want to talk about, why hasn't Dead Space 4 been announced as of yet, and what could we see as far as the future is concerned? Could EA potentially sell the IP, or could someone else kind of get their hands on Dead Space as a whole? Because I do think there is a lot of potential here, and there's certainly a fan base that wants another game. So let's talk about it. So in an article written by Rick Lane of PC Gamer, former Visceral creative director reveals plans for Dead Space 4. New information has emerged detailing Visceral Games' aborted plans for what would have been Dead Space 4. Speaking Eurogamer, former Dead Space creative director Ben Wannett revealed Dead Space 4 would have placed greater emphasis on exploration and scavenging resources for survival, blending the previous games' tightly scripted action with larger, more open areas that the player could explore freely. And I think that would be great, guys. Now, one thing I will say about that is this. I do believe that Dead Space, the core and really what this game was all, what was really wrapped around it as in a major way was this emphasis on the horror over the action and being in tight corridors, having necromorphs creeping up behind you and such, and on the ceiling, on the walls, and all of those things to really give you those scares. This reminds me of something where they're trying to go into this more open world setting, and what Dead Space 3 did poorly, in my opinion, which is why I think it wasn't as good as the first two, was the simple fact that they kind of prioritize action over horror, which is kind of going away from what made Dead Space so special in the first place. So I don't like the idea so much of, being able to explore. I feel like you should do somewhat of a soft reboot of Dead Space first of all, and then from there you can kind of get your footing and then kind of start trying new things. Because they tried new things with Dead Space 3, didn't work out, and I think that going that next level where you have exploration is just going to get further and further away from Dead Space and what really it was all about. But nonetheless, guys, I would have liked to see what they could have done here, because it could have been like Gears of War. Gears of War, guys, went, a very linear story to having semi-open world settings in Gears 5, and I really liked having semi-open world settings where we could explore the world and such. So there's definitely positives, but there's also those negatives. I think that Dead Space is so gritty, dark, and those, with the corridors and such, which you could still do with Dead Space 4, but having open world would kind of break up the horror elements of the story. So interesting idea, though. The notion was you were trying to survive day to day against infested ships, searching for a glimmer of life, scavenging supplies to keep your own little ship going, trying to find survivors. Now, Wannett is now the creative director at Crystal Dynamics. Dead Space 4 would have expanded upon the Lost Flotilla chapter of Dead Space 3, in which Isaac drifted through a graveyard of destroyed ships on the trail of an SOS signal. The Flotilla section in Dead Space 3 hinted at what non-linear gameplay could be, and I would have loved to go a lot deeper into that. The concept was that the player would hop from ship to ship, seeking out equipment and battling the horde of necromorphs that undoubtedly would have lurked inside. And see, I like that concept, right? I like the sounds of that, even though, sure, there would be elements of open world scenarios. But then there would also be going from ship to ship. You go inside those ships, it's probably going to be very claustrophobic, that very gritty, eerie type of feel and vibe you would get from those environments and such in Dead Space 4. So all of this sounds great. Our original prototypes for Dead Space 3 Flotilla had some pretty wild setups that I wish we had been able to use. The article reveals a couple of other interesting details. Dead Space 4 likely would have featured Isaac Clarke as the main character. There were no solid plans for who the player would have control, but Wannett's preferred choice of protagonist was Ellie, a side character featured in Dead Space 3. In addition, Dead Space 4 would have introduced a new range of necromorphs that were more dangerous in zero-G environments and reworked the controversial crafting element of the previous game. I love that it gave players creativity in putting together their weapons, but it became very difficult to tune when you allow players to break the primary and all-fire pairings. Now, here's what I'm going to say. I think that Dead Space, it was always behind what everyone else was doing. So like, for example, when they were trying to switch from this concept of being a single player campaign and they want to have co-op elements or action elements, they were always behind everyone else. And that's not what Dead Space and what made Dead Space so great in the past. I mean, like I said, horror over action, and they went away from that. And they kind of added co-op elements way too late into, you know, pretty much the cycle of what everyone else was already playing at that point in time. I believe what they should have done, even though it's a woulda, coulda, shoulda sort of ordeal, but I would love to see them take Dead Space 4, make this game, you know, from other previous entries in the series, especially Dead Space 3, kind of, you know, go back to what made it so good, but adding multiplayer, having like a horde mode like Gears of War does, where you can play with your friends and go up against waves and waves of like necromorphs would be absolutely awesome. Being able to play in a PvP setting and being able to the customization was awesome from the single player perspective. Having that multiplayer would have been great. Having all these different modes, guys, I think would have really helped Dead Space, and Dead Space 4, I would love to see that from this title. Now, Visceral, of course, never got the chance to put these ideas in action, having been added to EA's own studio graveyard late last year. Nonetheless, the revelations form yet another chapter in the series' fascinating history. Last year, Eurogamer also revealed that Visceral's original version or vision for Dead Space 3 was very different from the final product, while PC Gamer contributed Matt Paget learned that the original Dead Space began life as System Shock 3. So honestly, Visceral saying that Dead Space 3 was very different, which is kind of an interesting thing. I believe that EA definitely had its hand on it. My thought is this: could Visceral games come back from the grave? Could EA, you know, sell the IP to someone else? Because I think, guys, that, you know, really these games, the way that they continue, the way that they end up ultimately come back to life from being in a limbo state, is by the community. The community has to rally together and create some, you know, and really build a movement around these games in series, and Dead Space is one of those. And I do believe that there is a large community that really wants to see a continuation of Dead Space, because it was a very good concept, had some great ideas, had comics, movies, all kinds of different stuff that was being made around this title. So I would love to see a continuation at some point. Why doesn't EA just sell it to someone else? It's an IP that has a lot of potential. Why not sell it? Or let someone else take the helm and start working on another Dead Space game. Don't throw as much money at it. Obviously, Dead Space 3 did not make as much money as EA wanted, but at the same time, there's still a lot of potential there with this title. So I would love to see that happen. Do I think it will? Could we get a Dead Space 4 announced at EA Play at some point? I think there's a chance. There's a very good chance, guys. I mean, look, I think that EA is not going to throw as much money as they did, but I think that people wouldn't necessarily care. I think people would really, if you're going to have a relatively cookie-cutter Dead Space game that goes back to what made it so good in the past, you have a multiplayer, you've got, you know, co-op modes and such, you have a full package, as well as, you know, maybe even some free-to-play elements that the microtransactions and such put into the game are justified because you have like free-to-play elements to it. It could be something really special. I thought the customization was very cool for Isaac Clarke, and, you know, being able to like update his armor and such as you progress through the game. There's so much potential. Why hasn't it continued? I understand from just a marketing perspective, from, you know, financial perspective, I get it. But you could give a little bit less money, obviously, to it, and so that the developer is forced into making it pretty much like the original two games, not trying to do too much, and you could have something really special. Even if all you added was a PvE type of game mode. It was Dead Space, but it's like a horde mode where it's you and, you know, you're going up against waves and waves of enemies. People would play that. People would play PvP where you're able to update your armor and stuff. I'm telling you, I think that there is so much possibility with Dead Space. I think that they've only scratched the surface of what this series could really be, and it's unfortunate we haven't seen it at this point. But will we get an announcement soon at EA Play? I think it's possible. You know, a lot of people are saying, you know, a lot of people out there have been waiting for, like, you know, Battlefield, have been waiting for other titles from EA. But at the same time, guys, Dead Space, a lot of people have been waiting. I've been hoping Dead Space 4 gets announced, and it hasn't yet. But it really comes down to us, as the community, telling EA what we want, telling them that we want a Dead Space 4, a continuation, a soft reboot, or reboot, whatever you want to call it. And I believe we can make it happen. So go ahead, guys. Reach out to EA. Tell them that you want this game. Maybe it's already being made and we don't know it. But the best thing that we can do is telling the developers what we want. Let me know. Do you think we'll ever see a Dead Space 4? Whatever come back from the grave, guys? This series, this IP that we all love, one of my favorite horror games of all time. Let me know in the comment section down below. And for more Dead Space 4 content and videos, stay here with Zero TV.